Hello, and welcome to another episode of Leadership Table Talk, a show designed to help you develop and improve your leadership and management skills and talents. I am your host, Dr. Mary Gillam, a retired Air Force colonel and former member of the Senior Executive Service Corps with the Department of Defense at the Pentagon. I'm also the owner of Executive Leadership Enterprise and Management Services. In today's episode, I want to discuss developing a winning pitch for business strategy success. In the studio to discuss this topic with me is Mr. Peter G. Baldwin. Peter is the Managing Principal and Chief Business Coach at MarketForce Strategies. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mary. I really appreciate being invited.
Oh, thank you. Peter, let's just begin by telling the audience a little bit about your background.
Well, I've been in business development for well over 30 years, starting out in the insurance industry, selling niche products. And then about 15 years ago, I evolved into business coaching. I worked with a small firm that had a subsidiary that did business coaching, and they asked me to help them bring in more clients, which I did. And then I started my own company about 7 years ago doing the same thing.
Oh, fantastic. You know, Peter, since we are talking about pitching today, for those in our audience who may not necessarily understand what a pitch is, can you kind of briefly describe what a pitch is?
Well, I look at it in that there are two types of pitches. One is a standard elevator pitch, which is how you try to convey to your audience what you sell and why they should buy it. And the other is an investor pitch, which is intended to open the wallets of people who have money to invest in your company. The standard elevator pitch is very basic, while the investor pitch adds on the requirements for creating financial projections, marketing strategies, how you're going to spend their money, and what kind of return they can expect from the money that they loan you.
Okay, great. Now, Peter, in your experiences and so forth, are there certain elements that should be included when you are given a pitch?
Well, I tell my clients there are 5 steps to an effective elevator pitch, and I give them a handout to help guide them along that way. And the first step is a hook, some emotional connection you can make with your audience that is like a mental sticky note that makes them remember you down the road. And the second step would be to create an example of how you've helped people and what success that you've had. You should also be able to identify what your target market is or your ideal client, and try to elicit from them what kinds of, what makes you different than other competitors perhaps.
Excellent.
And you should also be able to describe what your product really is, what the wants and needs are that it fulfills. Every product or service solves a problem or fulfills wants or needs of a customer. You have to be able to effectively describe that. And then the final component is a call to action, which is basically some sort of mechanism that wants them to hear more about you, or you want them to go to your website to download a white paper or something like that, something to keep that connection going.
Absolutely wonderful. Now, Peter, let me ask, I know a lot of times we hear, especially in a lot of business development industries, that we need to also address the what's in it for me question. Can you talk about why it's important for people to do that?
Surely. As I mentioned earlier, when you're trying to sell a product or get an investor, you're fulfilling a want or need. Every product or every service fulfills somebody's want or need. And if you or I go out and buy a can of Coke or we go to a movie, we're fulfilling a want or need. So it's important that you're able to articulate what that want or need is that your client has and how you are fulfilling it. For investors, it's how do I get my money back and then some. And in an elevator speech situation, it's what am I going to get out of knowing you better and your product better? What kind of want or need are you fulfilling for me? So that's kind of in a nutshell what I'd say.
That is really great that you broke it down like that, because I know a lot of times when people start off giving their pitch, they talk about themselves and they don't really let the person that they're talking to understand or appreciate they are providing to meet a want or a need.
Right.
Can you kind of talk about some of the problems that you have encountered with those that you've listened to them give their pitches and you're like, oh my goodness?
Well, I guess some of the most common ones are that they don't know who their audience is. They don't know who their target market is. They cannot articulate what that want or need is. A lot of businesses, for example, will say, well, I sell information services, or I'm a management consultant. And that's your job title, perhaps, but that's not what you're fulfilling for the client. You're fulfilling either saving money, or you're saving time, or you're creating an opportunity that they couldn't have before. So those are the areas that I think they fall down on, not knowing who their target market is, and not describing or articulating what the want or need is that their service or product provides.
Okay, since you talked about not knowing who their target market is, are there strategies that we can use that will help us to better identify what our target market is?
Surely, and I think the first step is understanding what your product or service provides.
Yes.
And once you figure that out, then you can determine who would be most likely want to buy that product or service, an individual, for example, and then you identify what groups of individuals, maybe their trade association, maybe their membership organizations, maybe their PTAs, would be likely to assemble those types of buyers, and then you can use your marketing strategies to go after both the individuals and the organizations.
So, Peter, we started off talking about a pitch. Can you kind of give us an example of how you walk your clients through the development of a pitch, and maybe give us a pitch that you use yourself?
Well, I can give you my pitch. I'm not going to say it's the greatest example, but I use this as an example with my clients and then walk them through that. And I start off by saying, my name is Peter Baldwin with MarketForce Strategies, and we're a business improvement advisory that replaces the obstacles to business growth with solutions for business success. So solution number 71, Lego Company, the building block firm, was approached by Warner Brothers several years ago to make a movie, and they've been approached several times and refused. This time they accepted because Warner Brothers sold them on the idea that the message of the movie was that everything can be built out of Legos, and that convinced the CEO that that was a worthwhile venture. So in that regard, the selling concept was knowing who your audience was and fulfilling their want or need. So our ideal clients have been in business 3 or more years, have 3 or more employees, and have no option but to grow their business. Excuse me. And we help our clients in that regard by identifying the goals that they want to set, identifying the obstacles that get in the way of their goals, and then crafting business growth strategies that overcome those obstacles. And we offer anyone who is qualified as a small business a complimentary or free business growth gap checkup, which identifies the 7 components of business growth and which of those you are missing at no charge to the business.
Okay, fantastic. Peter, let me ask, you know the show Shark Tank?
I do.
Now, when you see a lot of the guests that come on pitching the investors and so forth, have you noticed those that have given the good pitches and have been successful, and those who have not been able to really articulate what it is that they want, and how, if they were your client, how you would maybe deal with some of that?
Yeah, I think the more successful ones have really clearly identified who's going to buy what they have to sell, and how many of those people are going to buy that product or service, and what the financial projections are from their product or service, how many future customers they expect, what the revenue is, what the expenses are, and more importantly than anything else is what's their business model. In other words, how do they expect to make money? Is it by per product, per service? Is it hourly? Is it fixed fee? Is it a percentage of revenue? And those are the ones who clearly send the message to the sharks that this is a viable product. And the sharks, like any other buyer, have to be convinced that their want or need, which is a return on their investment, is being fulfilled because of these issues of who the target market is and how much money they expect to take in.
So, Peter, when it comes down to even those who may even want to go on a show like Shark Tank, would you recommend that they enlist the help of a professional coach to help them to maybe craft that pitch to make sure that they get it down?
Yeah, absolutely. Whether they enlist the help of a coach or others who have gone through that or go through pitches themselves and watch others give their pitches, it's essential that you do that. And the value that an outsider brings is objectivity and the experience of having seen successes in the past where you as a first-time pitcher haven't been there before.
I like to, at this point, be honest about an example that I went through here not too long ago. I developed this product and I got selected as one of 6 candidates to participate in a innovation pitch competition. And I thought surely I was pretty good at giving pitches until I got to the actual competition. And the ladies there, I could tell that they had either engaged the help of a professional or they really studied the idea of how to give a really good, solid pitch. Because even though we had to give a pitch that was only 90 seconds, I practiced that, and then when I got to the actual event, they wanted us to change it up.
Oh,
well, it was like, how do I go now and add in all these things that they want us to now incorporate when I'd had this thing down pat, down to the wire with the timing and everything like that. And so, but it was one of those, I said, oh, wow, this is probably a time when I wish I had it engaged with a professional before I went out and did that. But I learned something off of that, and that's why I thought it would be very good to have you as a guest to really talk about not only coaching, but as we come back to continue talking about some business strategy and stuff like that. But it looks like we have come up on a break, so please stay tuned, and we will be back with you after the break to continue our conversation on the bits and pieces of really giving a good pitch. And not only that, but to also talk about some business strategies associated with that. Thank you.
Teens today take on leadership roles on the court, in the classroom, and in the community. Leadership Fairfax is looking for rising high school juniors and seniors who want to take their skills to the next level. Since 1987, Leadership Fairfax has inspired, engaged, developed, and connected with more than 1,600 leaders at all stages of their careers. This summer, learn leadership skills for college and beyond from Fairfax County's best and brightest. Begin your journey today by visiting leadershipfairfax.org.
Welcome back to Leadership Table Talk. My guest today is Mr. Peter Baldwin, and we're talking about developing a winning pitch for business strategy success. Before the break, we talked about all elements of a pitch. We really focused specifically on the pitch itself. And so now we want to transition and talk about business strategy. So Peter, since this is your area of expertise, can you talk about what your business actually offers clients from this standpoint?
Well, we have a handful of programs. The end result is a business growth program that our clients can use as their Bible and how to grow their business. So we offer identifying, as I mentioned earlier, we identify what the challenges are or the obstacles to their growth. We identify what goals they should be reaching, both revenue and non-revenue goals. And then we craft the strategies, and those strategies are only relevant to the goals and succeeding those goals. So we craft strategies that will help them reach their goals. And we do this through a homework assignment. We have a workbook that was created by MarketForce Strategies. We give homework assignments. We check their homework assignments each time we meet with them, and we give them input and advice. But the biggest thing we deliver, I think, is not rocket science. It's three components, which is focus, structure, and accountability. We help our clients focus on their goals and how to achieve them. We provide structure on achieving those goals through our workbook and homework assignments. And the accountability comes down to every time we meet, I'm going to ask them if they did their homework. So even though I can't make them, nor do I want to make them, that pressure is on them.
Oh, Peter, that is wonderful, especially that homework assignment to enforce the accountability aspect. I know a lot of times businesses will say that they want to go to that next level, and yet they don't have a strategy for how to get there. And yet they're still trying to maneuver and advance, but they overlook the strategy part. Right. So can you talk about why it is important that you have a strategy in the first place?
Well, let me give you a few examples. BlackBerry, Sears, Circuit City, Borders, they were all successful, huge companies who have failed or are in the process of failing because they didn't have a strategy that's concurrent with today's needs and market. So it's essential, just like I put it in terms of when you drive across country and you know you want to get to California, but you don't have a map, you may eventually get there. It'll take a lot longer. It'll be a lot more expensive, but you're navigating without a sense of direction. That's your strategy.
Oh, yes. Now, Peter, let me ask you, okay, you have the overall business strategy. Now for the subcomponents of the organization, should they also have a sub-strategy that feeds into the overall strategy? Because being accountable in their particular areas of responsibility, and okay, if I'm in marketing, so what is my strategy to grow the marketing for the entire organization? What am I doing to make sure that I meet that need?
Yeah, it's essential that all the strategies are congruent. Yes. So if you have an overall goal of, let's say, increasing your sales by $50 million, and you have strategies, say, for marketing, for human resources, for finance, that these are the goals they need to reach, then each of those departments have to have their own strategies as how they're going to achieve those goals. And they all have to be in line with the master goal of the $50 million they want to achieve, for example.
Now, Peter, let me also ask, you mentioned some companies earlier that are unfortunately in the process of probably going out of business or whatever. For a company to survive today, how can they survive without having a business strategy? They need to have a business strategy. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that 99% of the time. Here's the 1%. It's the monopolistic type companies. Years ago, if you're old enough, you might remember AT&T. Oh. And the only way you could get a telephone was to rent one from them. Absolutely. So they had no competition. Yes. So they didn't need a strategy then. But at some point they did, as we can see today, because landlines are almost non-existent. So yes, every business eventually will need a strategy. Otherwise, they're going to become a dinosaur.
That's a very good point, Peter, because my next question is this. As a company and you have your strategy in place, how often should you actually review that to make sure that you are not becoming obsolete in your road to moving forward?
Well, I advise my clients when we come up with a completed business growth plan, I advise them to look at it every month as a guidepost, and every 3 months to fine-tune it so that, for example, if they thought they might bring in 50 new customers, they only brought in 30 new customers, let's fine-tune it so we can get those additional 20. And then at least once a year, revise that plan. Oh, yes. So monthly, quarterly, and annually, you take up to the next level.
Oh, that is wonderful, Peter. Very good advice, and I hope you guys are paying attention here because this is really good advice. Let me also ask, have you had any of your clients or known people in the past who have been so locked into their current strategy that it was obvious that they needed to migrate to a different platform or a different plan? I do have an IT background, so I want to throw in that platform stuff, you know. But I think there are times when people get caught up in the fog of really being in love with their current strategy, and it's time for you to move on. Have you run into those kind of situations?
Well, certainly, and the examples of the Sears and the bookstore and Quiznos, for example, are prime examples of those. But I had a client that was a small manufacturer, and they had this niche for 25 years locally, and they were making a lot of money until an online company thought they could do it cheaper and more faster. And rather than trying to compete with that online company or to counter that online company's strategic approaches, and they just said they're not really competition. They don't do it right. They don't do it with quality. Despite that, the online company just wiped them out. So yes, definitely that there are examples of folks who just adhere to the old way of thinking, and you can't do that ever.
So I was curious as to when you run into a situation like that, how do you deal with that client? Do you just have to step back and say, I've done everything I can do here if you're not willing to change?
That's part of it. If I do a really good job in the beginning, I interview my clients to make sure they're going to be coachable and receptive to suggestions. But if I don't do that a great job and some of those folks slip through, then the most I can do is encourage them and show them examples of how that might be a failure to them. And if they want to accept it, that's fine, but if they don't, I can't force them.
That's a good point. Very good point, Peter. So as we talked a little bit about the transitioning or migrating to the different kinds of strategies, how important is the importance of innovation in your strategy development and not get caught in being left behind because you don't want to innovate. Because I know some companies, well, I don't have the money to innovate because it takes everything I've got to just maintain. But if you want to grow and get to that next level, which is what your business does in terms of helping people to get there, do they need to begin to look at innovation so that they can grow and not just, okay, that's something that other guys are going to do and I'm just going to stay over here?
Oh, surely. And when I talk to my clients about innovation, I'm not trying to convince them they have to buy the highest, most expensive technology apparatus that get them there. Innovation in terms of thinking. Think differently than you have thought in the past. Be innovative in how you approach customers. Be innovative in how you appeal to them. Be innovative in how you fulfill their wants and needs. So it's pretty low tech, but it's still innovative.
Peter, I just hit the head on the nail there, because a lot of times people think that when you talk about innovation, it's all about going out investing in the latest and greatest in technology, when just changing that mindset, that paradigm, and how you're thinking about how you do business just to make it even more suitable for today's marketplace and so forth. So Peter, as we continue our conversation, can you talk a little bit more about your company and what you offer, you would be willing to offer clients if they contact you and so forth? Surely.
As I mentioned earlier, I interview my clients as much as they interview me, so I want to make sure there's a good fit. But any of my clients, the underlying factor that ties them all together is they have no option but to grow their business. In other words, they're dissatisfied with their current growth, or they're satisfied but want to be more satisfied. But the option is, I must grow this company. If they don't have that desire, that will, then they wouldn't be a good fit for me as a client.
Now, Peter, let me ask you, in the time that we have left, can you maybe give some examples of some of those testimonials from people that you've helped in the past without going into anything that may be confidential or anything?
Well, I had a client that was a publisher that was dragged screaming into this coaching program by the owner. And within 9 months, they had their highest producing month of advertisements in their publication, despite the fact that the representative wasn't as keen on doing this coaching program as the owner was. I had another client that does digital education. They help small kids learn how to program. And in 18 months, they doubled their revenue from where they started to where they were with the coaching program. Now, that's not all attributed to me, because if the client wasn't doing their job, they wouldn't have that successes. But I'm hoping I had I was an instrument of guidance toward that success.
So I like what you said there, that with any coaching program, it's a partnership.
Exactly.
It's a partnership. So Peter, before we close out today, is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience about your business? How can they contact you?
Well, they can contact me at my website, which is www.MarketForceStrategies.com, or my email, pbaldwin@MarketForceStrategies.com, or my phone number, 703-200-0362.
Oh, fantastic. Peter, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to come and share such valuable information to our listening and watching audience today. And I also want to thank you for watching Leadership Table Talk. I hope that you have not only been inspired by our guests today, but have learned the importance of having not only the right pitch and business strategy for success, but building that partnership that will make it work for both of you. So if you have any questions about today's show, please contact me, Dr. Mary Gillam, at my website, www.executiveleadershipbiz.com. Again, this is Dr. Gillam. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.